Today we're going over the most terrifying serial killer who was never identified. For over 40 years nobody knew his name. His victims ranged in age from 13 to 41. He committed at least 13 murders and more than 50 sexual assaults. And for decades the only thing investigators knew was that he always wore a ski mask. We're starting this story in the summer of 1976 in Sacramento, California. A quiet suburb called Rancho Cordova, where families left their doors unlocked at night. That changed on June 18th. A young woman woke up to find a man standing over her bed. He was wearing a ski mask with only his eyes visible through the holes. A flashlight beam pinned her to the mattress. He had already unlocked the sliding glass door from the outside. He had already removed the bolts from her husband's gun while they slept. The attacker spoke through clenched teeth in a low, deliberate whisper. He told her exactly what he wanted and exactly what he would do if she screamed. Then he tied her up and spent over an hour in the house. Before leaving, he stole coins from a jar on the dresser and one earring. This was the first known attack of the man who would become the East Area Rapist. Over the next 3 years, he struck again and again. Each time the pattern was the same. He targeted single women and couples in quiet suburban neighborhoods. He stalked his victims for weeks before attacking. He learned their schedules and memorized the layout of their homes. He knew when their husbands worked late and which windows didn't lock. He entered houses through unlocked doors and windows that he had tampered with days earlier. Sometimes he brought his own rope pre-cut to specific lengths. He would separate the man from the woman and tie the man up first. Then he stacked dishes on the man's back. If he heard the dishes move, he said he would kill them both. He spent hours inside the homes. He ate food from their refrigerators and drank their beer. Sometimes he paused to watch television in the living room. Then he would return to the bedroom and continue the assault. He always wore gloves and never left fingerprints. He always wore a ski mask so no one saw his face. He always spoke through clenched teeth distorting his voice. And he always seemed to know things about his victims. He knew their names and where they worked. He knew their phone numbers and called them afterward. Sometimes he called years later just to remind them he was still out there. On one call, the victim heard children playing in the background. The attacks escalated rapidly. By 1977, the East Area Rapist had assaulted more than 30 victims. Police formed a special task force, but had no leads. The attacker seemed to be someone with military or law enforcement training. He moved through neighborhoods on foot and escaped on bicycle. He knew how to disable phones and cut power lines. He seemed to monitor police radio frequencies. Every time a patrol car approached, he vanished minutes before they arrived. The terror transformed Sacramento. Gun stores sold out, and locksmiths couldn't keep up with demand. Women slept with knives under their pillows and attacked every unfamiliar shadow. Families installed deadbolts and floodlights and slept in shifts. Then in 1979, something changed. The East Area Rapist stopped attacking in Northern California. But he did not stop. Later that year, a couple was found murdered in their home in Goleta, California. Dr. Robert Offerman and his girlfriend Alexandria Manning had been bound and shot. The killer had taken his time inside the house. He had eaten leftover turkey from the refrigerator. Investigators noticed familiar signatures. The bindings and the entry method matched the East Area Rapist. But the violence had escalated. He was no longer just a rapist. He was now a murderer. Over the next 7 years, the killer struck across Southern California, Santa Barbara, and Ventura, and Orange County, and Dana Point. He always attacked single-family homes in affluent neighborhoods after dark. He always brought his own bindings and weapons. In 1981, he murdered a couple in Ventura. Their 4-year-old son was found wandering the street the next morning. He had been tied up and left in another room. He told police that a man in a mask had hurt his parents. By now, the FBI had linked at least 10 murders to the same offender. They gave him a new name, the original Night Stalker, but internally investigators used a different acronym. They called him the ER-ONS East Area Rapist / Original Night Stalker. Because they now understood something terrifying. These were not two different criminals, escalating their careers. This was one man who had been terrorizing California for over a decade. The investigation spanned 3 decades and hundreds of detectives. They had semen samples from crime scenes, frozen in evidence lockers. They had a complete DNA profile of the killer, but DNA is only useful if you have someone to compare it against. And no suspect ever matched the profile. The task force chased more than 8,000 leads. They eliminated suspect after suspect through DNA comparisons. Survivors worked with sketch artists, producing dozens of composite images. The composite showed a white male with a narrow face and prominent nose. It could have been anyone. It could have been your neighbor. And as it turned out, it was someone's neighbor. In 2016, investigators tried something new. They uploaded the killer's DNA profile to a public genealogy website called GEDmatch. This was a database where people voluntarily uploaded their DNA to find relatives. The technology was originally created for people researching thickly trees. It had never been used to catch a serial killer before. The search produced distant relatives, third and fourth cousins who shared small segments of DNA with the killer. From these tiny connections, a team of 5 investigators built a family tree backward through time. They identified the killer's great-great-great-grandparents. Then they worked forward through thousands of descendants. The tree narrowed to one man born in 1945. A man who lived in Citrus Heights, California, 17 miles from the first attack. A man who had been a police officer during the exact years of the ER attacks. He had been fired from the Auburn Police Department years earlier. His crime was shoplifting a hammer and dog repellent. A man who was living in the same suburban neighborhood he had once terrorized. His name was Joseph James DeAngelo. On April 24, 2018, surveillance teams watched DeAngelo leave his house. They collected his DNA from his car door handle. And from something he tossed into a trash can, the lab ran the comparison. It came back as a match. Joseph James DeAngelo was the East Area Rapist and the original Night Stalker. He was arrested at his home the next morning. When officers entered his house, he whispered to himself in an empty room, "I have a roast in the oven." 42 years after his first attack, he was finally caught, not by a fingerprint or a witness, identification, or a confession, but by 6 strangers who had never met him. Distant cousins who had uploaded their DNA to learn where their ancestors came from, and in doing so, they helped catch one of the most prolific serial killers in American history. A man who had vanished for 42 years. DeAngelo pleaded guilty to 13 counts of murder and 13 counts of kidnapping. He was sentenced to life in prison without the possibility of parole. He will die there. The victims and their families finally got to face him in court. One woman told him he had stolen her ability to feel safe in her own body. Another said she had waited 44 years for this day. The youngest survivor was 13 at the time of the attack. She is now in her 60s. The Golden State Killer case changed criminal investigation forever. Since his capture, over 400 other cold cases have been solved using genetic genealogy. Cases that were just as hopeless as his once seemed. Cases that waited decades for a breakthrough that finally arrived. But here is what should keep you up tonight. D'Angelo was a police officer. He attended community meetings where detectives discussed the case. He was hunting his victims while wearing a badge, and for 40 years nobody knew. Not his neighbors, and not his daughters, and not the woman he married. He lived among the people he terrorized. He drove past the homes of his victims every day on his way to work. The most dangerous predator in California history was hiding in plain sight. The only reason we know his name today is because of a stranger in a different state. Someone who once swabbed the inside of their cheek.